my mother was killed when I was 5. And it was some way or another, it was related, she was shot. Some way or another, it was related to racial. Now, was that the Chinaman? Was it the whites? It wasn't the blacks. Like I say, didn't really have much to do with the blacks. So, but it could have been, like I say, either the white or the Chinaman. And so these are things, and that's why I was 5. And she was American. And then and then I went without a mother till probably about 10 or 12 years old. And then I got my stepmother, who was Chinese. And she came from China. And the reason she came from China, and the reason she wasn't with my father in the first place, my father had 2 wives at one time. The Japanese took over China in the 30s. And then, so he lost contact with his Chinese family. And it ended up, he got messing around with the white girl, the American girl. That's how I came. Now, so what it was, now this part Chinese, the Chinese culture is you respect, you give respect. That's one of the things that I got out of the Chinese culture. And then seeing I was around the racial stuff, I mean, there was restaurants I couldn't go into. I know the movie theater, there was certain areas I could sit in and certain areas I couldn't. There was a lot of little things like that. That's what segregated means. You're in your own areas. And really, I don't really remember that much in the way of violence racially. And the reason is we're segregated. Everybody kept their places. The problem was with me being Chinese, black wasn't my place. But it wasn't black and white, it was white and colored. So then, does that mean I'm colored? Does that mean I'm supposed to be with the blacks? That was where my problem was. So the blacks really didn't go along with what I did and how I thought and how I did things. So it was, but I didn't really associate with them. Now, you had racial people that really did have problems with other races. And they were blacks and they were whites. Now, where I was, we didn't really have Mexicans. I'm sure they probably had the same problem. And out in California, I know they had the problem with the Chinese. A lot of Chinese out in California, and they kept the Chinese separate. And this, like I say, women, I think women got the vote before the Chinese got the vote. So dogs were able to go places where Chinese couldn't go. So there was a racial thing, and it was kind of funny because it wasn't like when a black would go into a white place, they would take a stick out and beat on them and stuff like that. That's not the way it was. Really, if you as a black or I as a Chinaman would go into a place, I could pretty much go any place I want, really. I respected their rules. So in other words, if they said they didn't want me over, and I'd ask them, you want me over here or over there? And then it depends on how I would act, on how they would react. In other words, and I learned this young, and what it was, if I act respectful, if I use manners, good morning, how y'all doing today? Where would you like me to sit? And they more than likely would have me sit anywhere or, whatever. And the reason was I was respectful. I never thought about it at the time because that's the way I was brought up. And that's the way our culture dictates. And when I say our culture, I'm saying Chinese, and I'm saying American. When I say American, I'm not saying black. I'm not saying white. I'm saying American. Americans are respectful people. Now I'm talking about in general. Now, I talked about the racial problems. There were some that weren't respectful. Whites that weren't respectful to blacks, and blacks that weren't respectful to whites. And I'll tell you, if they weren't respectful, I say the blacks to the whites or the whites to the blacks, I guarantee they weren't respectful to the Chinaman. But like I say, we were respectful to everybody. When it is. And that respect is what made things easier for me to get along. Now, I have noticed respectful people that show respect to others, get along pretty much anywhere. Now, yes, I understand I'm old. I understand that. I'm still respectful to others. Now it's easier for others to be respectful to me because I'm old. They respect me for being old. But it's funny because it's the same people that have racial problems. It's always the same people. And the ones that have racial problems are always disrespectful people. Always. And now, it's funny because people hide their disrespect. And a lot of times we call that being not being sincere. And it's funny because some people act sincere, but you can tell they're racial. They're really racial. Probably about the best example of that is Hussein Obama. He acts sincere. He uses manners. and he acts respectful. But one thing you can tell in the long run, people can only act so long. And that's what's been going on with him. You can see he can only act respectful so long. And then finally everything starts coming out. And that's why the more you get to know about certain people, the more you realize how prejudiced they are and racially motivated they are. And now race, I don't want to get too hung up on the race, like race is the only prejudice thing there is, because they got the same thing with sexually confused people. And really, it's all based, they all have the same problem. They all have the same problem. They're disrespectful. Anybody that's racial or prejudiced, they're disrespectful towards others.